This episode of The Crossroads is brought to you by the Black Podcast Collective, a growing community of Black creatives. If you are a podcaster, join the collective for networking opportunities and tips for growing your audience. Listen to the weekly show devoted to helping podcasters develop, grow, and sustain their shows. Join the collective by visiting blkpodcollective.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Crossroads. I'm not looking at the camera. This is your host, Rashida Green, and this is the show for and about environmental justice and those who fight the fight with skin as melanated as the days are long. Knowledge is power, and we're breaking down stereotypes one episode at a time. So today, we're trying a new thing. I've got two of my three guests in residence, Miss Nisha Forbes and also Mrs. Brandy motherfucking Brooks.
I think that's the first time I've been introduced that way. Wow.
And Nisha knows that I will gush on her later, but we are here to have a very thorough discussion about nonprofits and the industrial complex. But before we get there, I'm going to let Nish and Brandy introduce themselves, and then we're going to give some flowers. Whoever, go hit it. Introduce yourselves.
I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandy Brooks. I live in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I am an organizer and facilitator and trainer. I run a racial training and consulting and coaching firm called Radical Solutions, LLC, as well as being co-director of a national organization called Political Healers, which really focuses on centering the leadership of women and femmes and trans and non-binary folks of color in organizing and movement spaces, and also do consulting with another great company called One Square World. So I do a lot of stuff, but all of it is around organizing for our liberation and figuring out how we build the new world.
Yay. I don't need to introduce myself after that. Like, Brandy.
You do? Stop it.
I just love Brandy. Like, Brandy's my new friend. I'm Nisha Forbes. I am a Black trans femme, woman, goddess, mother. I don't necessarily represent a particular organization. I typically don't like to represent organizations, even though I've worked in specific organizations. But I tend to get a little Black. And so I try to distance myself from.
Oh man, that's gonna have to be one of the first things we talk about.
Yeah. So I like to I'm here representing myself. I'm just a Black trans woman trying to survive, trying to live in a colonial, capitalist, patriarchal society. And I'm happy to be here. So holding space, sharing space.
Yes. I will like anyone who knows or has listened to the episode that Misha and I recorded, The Shelter or the Streets, knows that I literally rushed the episode so I could get off a fooling with y'all to tell her how much I am like a stan, I guess, like a major stan. So no promises about this conversation. So I could tell Misha how awesome she is, and Brandy too, or however it all shakes out. But anyway, so want to get started by giving some flowers. And this is the segment in the show that I often forget, but it's the part where we give flowers to someone either in our lives or someone, in the movement or someone that inspires us. I've given Beyonce flowers for the last two episodes, so I think I'm going to switch it up today and give it to Miss Tina. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to give flowers Actually, I'm going to give some flowers to Franz Fanon because it's one of his comments about reform that I really want to like bring into like part of our discussion. Where when he's talking about the war of liberation is not seeking reform; it's for people to discover. It's their people to discover their own genius and their history and their sovereignty. So I wanted to give flowers to him, bring that piece into the conversation. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, so Rashida, I'll go. Or wait, no, actually, Misha, do you want to go first?
Sure. I want to give flowers to the Black and Brown and Indigenous trans non-binary people who are existing under this climate, under this administration. As you know, like we have had over 26 transgender murders within this year alone. I've been following this since maybe 2013 while I was working in research. I started to follow this really gross trend. And it just seems like every year just seeks to outdo itself with just how horrific of violence can be like doled out to trans and non-binary people. And I'm just here to give flowers to those folks who are still living and who's still surviving and existing and waking up every day, also living under a pandemic. I mean, listen, we are a resilient people. So I just want to give flowers to us.
Mm, absolutely. Um, I want to give flowers to two groups of folks. One are all the amazing folks who are currently at the People's Black National Convention, sponsored by the Movement for Black Lives. They are, sort of a select group of activists and advocates from all across the country who are going to be helping to plan the Black National Convention that's happening at the end of August, August 28th. So folks should be on the lookout for that. Because I think, and one of the reasons I want to give them flowers is just this national movement to say, like, forget this noise. We are going to step up and step fully into our leadership in the policy and political space because we are done with folks not getting it done for our communities in all the various ways that that's happening. And I also want to salute a local group called PG Changemakers, so Prince George's Changemakers, who held a great session last night on titled Black Policy Matters. And again, this idea of really stepping into our leadership and saying that we need and want to lead as Black folks using the hard-earned wisdom that we have gotten from being Black folks in this country to set the agenda for what the solutions need to be for a wide variety of communities here in the United States. So just want to give some flowers to those two groups of folks.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a heavy load ahead of us. So we have to kind of set the tone, set the frame for this. So there's an excellent book that is part of the framework for this discussion. And I definitely suggest everybody goes out and gets a copy of it and reads it. There are excerpts of it available on Google. If you go to Google Books, if you're that kind of a nerd like me. But the book is called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. And it's by Incite, and that's all in all caps, INCITE. And I think it's a longer title than just Incite. But in that book, it's a really dense read, but it's providing what we were going to be using among other things, among our personal experiences as well, to frame this discussion. And the place I would like to start is with a little bit of history, like a little bit of history, of nonprofits. And I think I mentioned this, that my working with nonprofit is a little bit different in terms of nonprofit work hasn't been my focus for my career, mostly just something that I do in addition to my career. But, obviously Brandy and Misha had that experience. So I wanted to get started with like a little bit of the history. So Brandy, I think I talked to you about, just a little bit of the history of it. If you want to give, we can start with you giving the history of it, and just we can go straight to the personal experience. We can just get straight to the grits.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I want to just give props to again is Insight. The full name is Insight Women, Gender Nonconforming, and Trans People of Color Against Violence. So again, I just want to note our leadership in analyzing the things that are going on and the things that we're seeing in these structures that are actually harming a lot of people across the board, but where we've seen particular impacts because we get targeted due to race or to gender identity and the intersections of that with class, etc. So I just wanted to give insights and props as well. And it's interesting when as I was telling Rashida and Misha when before we got online, one of the funny things about going to grad schools that sometimes they give you big heavy books of case law about nonprofits that turn out to be useful later in your life, like when you want to do a podcast about it. So when you look back at the history of kind of like how nonprofit corporations came about, like these go back to the start of the colonization of the landmass that we now know as the United States of America. And they were kind of a form that was also very familiar in England at that time, basically a way of people coming together to do like public works for the public good. And one of the things that gets noted, when you read some of this history, is that both like actually public, like government driven or public private partnerships around doing public good existed, simultaneously with these like private corporations and private entities that were also developed to do these charitable works. And they could include everything from like creating roads in a place to doing service for those who were poor and in need in a community. So so you have that structure that kind of comes and it starts out and is really about do these things. But one of the there is a philosophy that you see even starting with the Puritans, where there's this belief that basically poverty is kind of normal. So, there's not really a responsibility of a society to that. And I think a quote from Jesus in the Bible that says the poor will always be with you. He wasn't saying like just accept poverty. He was actually making a difference about why, he was asking folks to focus on him at this time and on the message that he was delivering. But for reasons, because it gave them, the kind of permission to allow poverty and oppression to stand, even though there are a lot of other places in scripture where the scripture is very clear, especially in the Old Testament, about the responsibility of God's people to like address poverty and support those in need. Folks like to take that one quote and be like, the poor will always be with us, so who cares? Mm-hmm. And so the idea really was that doing these charitable works was very voluntary. It wasn't a societal responsibility. It was as you got moved in the spirit, like it's a recommended practice that you do good works and you pool your resources to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just like an important thing to remember as we look at ultimately the role that nonprofit corporations end up playing in United States society. And, so these go on and develop and, they're developed as corporations. There's like some technical reasons for that, why they're developed as corporations instead of trusts, like they were in England. And then states kind of start making rules to regulate what are the purposes for which you can form one of these things? How much money can you accrue? How do you need to do it? And there start to be different flavors of them over time. Educational and religious and like scientific and technical purposes are the core ones, but unions, professional associations, a lot of different things actually fall under the category of a nonprofit. And this is where you see, for instance, people being surprised that the National Football League is in fact a nonprofit, even though because it's actually a professional association. Right. So, and this is actually one of the key confusions that people have about what a nonprofit is, and why the name is a bit misleading. A nonprofit doesn't mean that it is an entity that is not allowed to bring in revenue in excess of its expenses. In fact, like most successful corporations in the United States, people bring in, successful nonprofits bring in revenue in excess of their expenses. And that's what allows them to grow and do all these different things. So nonprofits do make financial profit. What they can't do is distribute that profit to any individual who controls the corporation. So you can't distribute profit to your board of directors. You can't distribute profit, to your officers of the corporation. So that's really what nonprofit means. And again, a lot of folks get confused about that, especially when you see very large nonprofits that are making a heck load of profit, but are clearly still falling into the status of not having to pay taxes. And again, it was set up, this idea that people are pooling their resources to carry out like charitable and other works in the public interest. And so one of the ways to encourage people to do that is that you wouldn't tax that income that they got. So there's so this develops over the centuries and centuries. One of the other key pieces that's really important in looking at how the nonprofit landscape looks now is like how we got to develop not just a lot of different nonprofits, but also this particular like nonprofit industrial complex, as Insight calls it. And that's something where you really start to see in about the 1970s that there is this increased directive to, instead of having government to like carry out public services, for governments to start contracting with private entities, particularly nonprofit entities, to carry out those services. And especially as you go into like the Reagan years, where government services are being cut back and cut back and cut back.
Brandy, I believe your internet has messed up.
Did it?
Brandy, I think your internet has messed up. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I think we lost.
We're lost. So, but also like, and kind of to continue what she's saying about Reagan, I mean, after or during Reaganomics, that era, and also what was going on in England too with Margaret Thatcher, it was just a very violent dismantling of social programs. And an example of how buy-in was created was the example of welfare queens, this idea of these Black women who were just sitting on their duff, not working, and reaping the benefits, quote unquote, of a social program. So when we're talking about the nonprofit industrial complex, I want to ask you, Mish, like, what has been your experience, either to start, maybe if you've had experience not working at a nonprofit, but seeking services from them, and how comprehensive they were, and then we can go into your own personal experience of like working at a nonprofit.
Yeah, so part of my transition really entailed that I would need to connect to an organization or group that was actually because I was poor, I was broke. Not to mention I was starting from scratch. I had lived off the grid, I think, for many years, especially through the beginning of my transition, and just really not having any identification that reflected my gender, that I could present, So I knew that, especially if I was going to be entering the job force, that I would definitely need to connect with people who can actually, connect me to the resources that I needed in order to get a name change, get some of the documents that I had lost, changing things with Social Security, getting my gender marker changed, all those things, like setting up, insurance, to be able to access hormones, all those things. So I had to connect with an agency, and I did, with the Sylvia Rivera Law Project in Manhattan. And so they do a lot of prison abolition work, and but they also do a lot of work with TGNC people, with assisting with name changes and all of that stuff. And I sat on their board of directors for a while until I had to leave. But the experience, with accessing resources versus actually working within an organization is very different. It's you know, you go in, especially the nonprofits are looked at as just this beacon of hope, right? And so you go in with this optimism and this just very trusting relationship, you know, and you're like, oh, these people are going to save me. They're going to, like, you know, and for the most part, they actually did. You know, I really credit the Sylvia Rivera Law Project for giving me my life back in a lot of ways, and really helping me to kind of establish and be established in the work that I'm doing now. And I really appreciate that. Now, on the flip side of that, working within a nonprofit, you start to see how, you know, it's really, you know, one thing I've learned as a person, as a marginalized person, and I really hate to say that, is that, you know, you don't really have the language to describe what it is that you're experiencing. You only have the feelings, you know? And so for a lot of people, disenfranchised people, you really go into it feeling like, okay, well, I don't know what this is, so maybe this is me. You start to internalize a lot of your experiences. And so you start to question, like, you know, and then pathologize yourself, you know what I mean? Because also there is a pathology that supports that as well, you know what I mean? And so you're getting this kind of like attack on both sides about you being an issue, and then you're hearing that you're an issue, because you can't quite prove that what is happening, you know? And after a while, I guess, you know, while learning and researching, you start to realize how, you know, a lot of nonprofits, you know, became a thing, right? Where it was really a way to kind of control the people and control specifically Black and brown people, so that they're not, you know, like creating an uprising or whatever, you know what I mean? And, you know, I realized that a lot of the work that I was doing was, while I would be creating a lot of solutions to a lot of challenges that, you know, we'd have meetings about, oh, why are we not reaching Black and brown trans women? Like, what's going on here? And like, why can't this happen, or why can't that happen? And then you go back and you say, well, these are some of the like systemic oppression that Black and brown people face, particularly trans people. And so we need to address those before we can actually start to see them wanting to see us as like their savior or whatever, if that's what the fucking goal is, right? But then it would always go back to, well, how about we do this? Like it would never, there's never, you bring them, they ask a question, you answer the question very plainly, you let them know, hey, Black and brown people, they need healthcare, they need better jobs, better paying jobs, they need, you know, it's like, okay, no, it's not that, it's something else, you know? And so you start to play this game where, and I feel purposely so, that they really target activists to actually do the work, as a way of, I would say, burning us out, you know what I mean? So that we're not focused on actually, we don't have any energy to participate in the real work that's actually happening in a very real way, you know? And so you really start to, that's why I don't believe in the word burnout, right? I feel like nonprofit, especially within nonprofits, there's like, burnout is like the thing. Like every nonprofit talks about burnout. They have policies around burnout. They have, you know, directives for burnout and how to address burnout. And it always comes down to, you're just not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not managing your time well. You're the problem. It's not us. You're the problem, you know? And it speaks to, you know, just how, I would say, insidious the nonprofit industrial complex really is, right? Because it enlists folks who would be out doing real work to create real abolitionist work, rather than trying to do reformation, right? Or trying to uphold a system that's still perpetrating violence against you every day, every second of the day, you know?
And, wanting to bring history back into the equation, and then Brenda, I'll give it back to you. Based upon the readings, the nonprofit industrial complex dismantled a lot of very serious, very, liberating work of Black folks in the 70s, namely, as an example, the Black Panther Party. Like a lot of the programs that they had, my personal favorite was the free lunch program. These are things that they created, and they were of course, just because of not just the nonprofit space, but also the social attack, the attack by the FBI, everything to effectively destroy and make them ineffectual. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation too. So Brandy, what were you going to say? Y'all mute, girl.
So I just want to, I got you. I'm getting there. So, but I just wanted to chime in this thing of burnout. I'm so glad that you brought this up, Misha, because what that is, this is exploitation. Can we just stop calling it burnout and just call it exploitation? Because the nonprofit structure, like every other structure in the United States, is still based on racism. It's still rooted in sexism. It's still rooted in colonialism, in imperialism. It's still a tool of capitalism. It's still a tool of maintaining capitalist class oppression. Like you look and you think about it, and you think about like what was happening during like sort of the industrial era, the industrial revolutionary, and the age of the robber barons. Again, you have these people making goo gobs of money, and then all these other folks trying to pool their resources to address the grotesque poverty and like all the results of basically exploiting people without worker protections. So it's really important for us to remember that all throughout the history of this, it's used as a tool to like address or tinker at the edges, like to reform piece. Like one of the things we talk about in reform versus transformation is that, reform is about basically allowing the system to continue as is with minor tinkers so that people don't get too upset at its negative impacts. That's not the same thing as transformation. That is not the same thing as liberation. So of course, these structures are going to co-opt and exploit young people with energy, with the desire to do something new. They're going to take that in and they're going to suck the life out of you. They're going to and look, yes, have I worked for some nonprofits that I have loved? Yes. Do I work for an entity now that is a nonprofit? Also, yes. One of the reasons I work for that entity is because I and my partner are deliberately committed to in every aspect of our operations, orienting it toward like what does liberatory organizational policy look like? What does it look like to actually make sure that all of our programs and all of our consulting are oriented toward this? Because we don't want to, we're trying to use the structure to redirect resources to what we want to do, but we are not trying to look like every other part of this structure. Right. And even in really great nonprofits with great missions, you still see this stuff going on. You still see the exploitation. You still see the co-optation. You still see the suppression of the voices of people of color, of the voices of women and femmes and trans and non-binary folks, of the voices of young people, of the voices of people who are coming from different parts of the country. You still see it all because it is still one of those tools. And of course, they took the breakfast program of the Black Panthers, which was designed not as a hunger alleviation program, although it was addressing hunger in our communities, but was designed as part of a platform, part of a series of pillars for us to organize for self-determination. So of course they're going to try and snatch that, take down the organization, and then make it look, free lunch provided by your government, absent the political analysis about why it is that Black communities need free lunch in the first place.
Come on.
And this is still the conversation that we are having in nonprofits. There's this idea that sometimes becomes sort of kitschy, but we should really be thinking about this more. This idea that nonprofits should work themselves out of jobs. And sometimes people will say that with a different orientation. They'll say it because it's the new vibe thing. But seriously, we should be solving root causes of oppression. As someone who has done a lot of work in food system spaces, and talked with actually some great people at food banks who are wrestling with this, food banks are not the answer.
No, they're
They
not.
will, if
No.
we continue to have a system that is constantly generating poverty and hunger, there will never be enough food banks in the world. And this idea that we're going to continue doing this voluntary, when I feel like it, I will help to meet the needs of my other people, as opposed to saying it is a societal responsibility for us to make sure that people are housed and fed, and that they have health care, and that they have education that isn't designed to turn them into drones who don't respect their own identity. Like, if we don't decide that that's a societal commitment, there's no amount of people voluntarily occasionally giving their time that is going to address those root things. Sorry, you got me all head up.
It's okay.
I got me
Shit. My microphone done fell down, girl. Got me excited when that goddamn microphone fell down, girl. I just played with my hand.
So I think Brandy hit it on the head, that like addressing the root cause. Like there's not a real plan or any type of attempt to address any of the real issues that affect Black and brown people. You know what I mean? And it's it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous.
It is.
And let's talk about just. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
Keep going.
Sorry, I've got a lot to say. It's just gonna start it out. Like, let's talk about the structure of the resource foundation for this sector, which is philanthropy. Let's talk about philanthropy for a second, y'all. The entire premise is make your money however you want to make it. Don't pay attention. Exploit some workers. Cause them not to have food or housing. That's totally cool. You'll give some of it back on the back end, and that'll be fine. And then you have these folks who are using philanthropy to feel good about their position in the world as economic and environmental and social exploiters, and saying, but it's fine because I gave it on the back end, as opposed to, for instance, looking at the structure of our taxes. And not that the structure of our taxes in like the 50s or 60s was perfect, but it was a lot more oriented to say, no, you actually don't need to be worth $144 billion, which I think is Jeff Bezos' current net worth. Like, but we've said instead, no, that's totally fine. It's totally fine if you cause structural oppression all over the place that needs to be remedied, so long as you give a fraction of it back later, or you make a bequest when you're dead, maybe.
Jesus.
Sorry, I just all I have is
I was in my research, I found that only about 18% of nonprofit employees are people of color. Yikes. So from your experiences, and I can talk about mine too, but from y'all's experiences working in nonprofits, is that true? And then what were some of the instances or examples of the things that you've had to deal with while also trying to execute on the missions of the nonprofits? Hit it, Mish.
I mean, if you're looking at it from, I guess, a senior management, who holds a senior management position or a board of directors position, then the higher you go, the less Black and brown people you're actually going to see. Where you're going to see a lot of Black folks, a lot of brown folks is direct service workers, but who are making, less than maybe $30K annually. If you have a degree, maybe like 45, 55 tops maybe. But you have your CEOs, you have folks who hold a position of power who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have folks who are also hiring family members as consultants, and I mean, it's just really, you don't see anyone that looks like you at all, you know. And it's I mean, you don't have to be a rocket science to figure out what's happening, you know what I mean. And what I've realized too recently is that um it's becoming more overt. Whereas before, they would make excuses for it. It would be something that maybe is not even talked about really, and maybe by one or two people, and then those people will end up just leaving anyway and going to another, just hopping through nonprofits thinking that it's going to be different at a different nonprofit, and then it either, you know, and it's just worse, you know, in other places, you know. But I think now more so they're very overt about it. You know, I told you I had a meeting. We started a task force, which I'm starting to think. I'm really starting to rethink that whole thing, right? Because I like when I really sit down and I really think about it, when it comes down to it, it's about money and power. And you know, folks who want to hold on to power and money. And so, you know, whenever you start to try to combat that or talk about that or highlight that, especially if you're a Black person in that space, you're going to be met with a lot of retaliation, yes, but I think for me as a person who's always done this, I feel, you know, that's part of the territory. It's going to happen, right? But what doesn't happen is change. I mean, really. You know, and that's just from my own personal experience. You know, I think if an organization really wants to change, they're going to change. However, you also have to look at their funding source. If their funding source does not support that change, it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? If your workers are saying things or bringing up things about race and equity and talking about real change, they're not here for it. They're not going to do it. You know, it's not going to happen. And so for me, I think when I start to do that, and when I start to get in these modes where I'm like, okay, let's organize, let's do this, let's do that, I have to remind myself of the what it is that we're really fighting. You know what I mean? It's not so much we're fighting the organization, is what the organization represents, is what those people represent, is what those people who hold those positions of power and those seats of power, who they represent and who they're sitting in place of, right? And so when I'm having these conversations with other people about equity and inclusion and policy change and all these things, I'm realizing, like, yes, you know, sometimes you're putting your job and your security on the line for nothing. You know what I mean? Because again, it's not just about that organization. You know, like what you really want to be doing is it, but your folks aren't getting paid to do abolitionist work. You know what I mean? So.
And you know, another thing in talking about the funding is that one thing we really got to bring into this conversation is foundations, because that's really the way that like the wealthy have been able to shield themselves from having to pay their fair share of taxes. So they've really set up these supposed charitable organizations so they don't have to pay that much in taxes. And that's a funding source for nonprofits. Also, so are corporations. It's not just, you know, little nice old people living in some tower giving writing checks. It's also these corporations as well that are also donors. So in your experience, when if you've had a donor that, or a new corporation that wants to donate to the organizations that you've worked at, has it changed kind of the culture? Has it changed what the focus or some of the projects are aimed for?
So I want to answer that because I have a good, my favorite story about the nonprofit industrial complex is about how foundations do frackery around these things. But I did want to, Misha, you said something that I just wanted to highlight. This idea of feeling like you're putting all your time and your effort into this work that ultimately isn't shifting the needle. Like and this was a place that I came to in 2014, after Mike Brown was murdered in Ferguson, and sitting there and it was a realization that had been coming on me for a while. But it was just like, look, we are doing all this work. A lot of people are sincerely trying to put their time and energy into this stuff. There's a fair bit of money coming in on here, but we're not changing any of the power structures about how and whether or not people are hungry or have control over their food system, or like how or whether people have access to land and capital and other resources. We're not changing any of the dynamics of who makes decisions about any of those systems. And I just got so frustrated because I was like, what am I putting all of my time and energy into if it's not changing any of that fundamental stuff?
Right.
And that's actually what started to led me to move down here to where I am in the mid-Atlantic, be closer to my family because I was totally afraid for the kids in my family, but also led me to say, like, I gotta find a different way to do this, like, work, whatever I'm doing, because I can't just be like pouring my heart into this thing that just burns me out. Because I want to be doing work that really uplifts my community for the rest of my life, but I can't do it this way. And ultimately, that was actually what started to lead me into organizing and power building and to really change systems and structures. So I wanted to note that because I thought what you said about that was really, really important. And yeah, let's talk about foundations. So, one of the interesting things that's going on right now in the nonprofit and industrial complex is that a lot of foundations are interested in investing in equity. They want to like form collaboratives to like, invest in equity and build up these systems, et cetera, et cetera. And I will note there's a heavy amount of sarcasm in my voice. There are
He is
people
quite
in that
exceptional
system,
today.
there are people in that system who have good intentions, but as the saying said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
It is.
And if you have all these good intentions without any analysis of what your impact looks like, then you're just taking dumps on people all the way along your road of good intentions. Sorry, that's what's happening.
It's fine.
And one of the dumps that I remember seeing taken in my history was talking with this foundation that gave like hundreds of thousands of dollars to this this new business that was going to be like doing prepared foods in a low income section of Boston, and that was led by the former CEO of Trader Joe's. Now, at the same time, there was a grassroots, people of color centered group of folks who were working to build out a cooperative in the same area of the city. And they got like a pittance of a grant. But these other folks got like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I remember asking someone at this foundation, I was like, so, hey, about that equity thing, you got this person over here who, this older white dude, where you're like, I will give you all the money. You've got this group of Black and brown folks and their white allies over here, and you're like, nah, here's some chump change that won't do anything to really get you where you need to go, but we'll say we're still supporting you. And I was like, please explain to me, if equity is something that you're centering, how that happens. And the basic response was, well, this person had the experience and the capacity, and these folks didn't yet. And my two questions were, experience doing what? Because they definitely have experience serving Black and brown neighborhoods, because that's not where Trader Joe's goes.
No.
So I'm like, what kind of experience are you counting? Because it's definitely not experience serving the people that they're saying that they can now serve. Second, the reason the Black and brown people don't have financial or other capacity is because of 400, 500 years of structural oppression. And every time you're like, well, I'm not going to give you any money because you don't have capacity, all you do is maintain that cycle.
Yes.
if nobody ever stops and says, maybe I need to shift resources over to Black and brown people for once, guess what? We're still not going to have piles of money because you just gave the giant pile of money to someone who was already on top of this system, you know, and the person hemmed and hawed and was like, blah, 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 blah. But like that shit, that, you know, and again, as people are doing this equity work and they're well-intentioned, they are not sitting here and saying, we need to massively shift resources and massively reevaluate the way that we do this thing, recognizing that we are full-on agents of structural oppression. Like, not just like, oh, there's some things that we need to correct, but like we are a core driver of this thing. And I'll say most people, but there are some foundations that are really trying to look at this seriously. Two that I'll name in the Mid-Atlantic, the Consumer Health Foundation and the Meyer Foundation, who have gone through a really deep process. Consumer Health Foundation in particular, led by this just amazing, amazing CEO, Yannick Redwood, and she's just outstanding. And, you know, has taken their staff and their board through this process of completely reevaluating how they do grant making. And they now have this racial equity assessment tool. And I remember being at a meeting where they were telling their grantees that, like, here, we're going to evaluate this totally differently. And it was like, you had to have a root cause analysis around structural racism. And you had to talk about like how you were empowering community. And you had to ask, and there were all these grantees in the room and they were like, but I don't know how to answer that question. And they were like, well, that probably means you're not going to get money from us. And it was beautiful because it was like, it was a foundation. And, you know, Consumer Health Foundation is great. Unfortunately, they're relatively small in the World Foundation, but still they were looking to lead, again, Black women leading, you know, being one of the folks leading this charge, saying, we are going to reconfigure this because we recognize that if we don't change the way that we do business, we are just keeping this going.
And, you know, and that's something else too, before me and then Misha, I'm gonna turn it over to you too, because I want your take on this as well. But, you know, I just wanted to say really quickly that when we're talking about these cycles, like Brandy, you mentioned that this is just creating like a continuous cycle of inequity. This is the same thing that we're talking about when we talk about the prison industrial complex, that really it is effectively scooping up undesirables and putting them someplace else. So it continues to maintain wealth for the ruling class. Because we know that prisons there are for-profit prisons, that the land that they sit on has value. Who owns the land and owns the building makes the money. And so we have to, you know, I just wanted to bring that into the conversation too. So Misha, I wanted to give you an opportunity to answer as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think that's why I'm so like on pins and needles in this particular climate, you know, with all the protests and things that are happening. And I'm, you know, and I'm always going back to, you know, like you'll never have, you know, the Black community will never have another Messiah unless we create one, you know what I mean? And just how, you know, the nonprofit industrial complex was created as a response to the civil rights movement, you know what I mean, the Black Panther Party, and any kind of like overt, like intentional desire to dismantle this current system, you know, and, you know, just going back to just how we know that this nation likes to operate, which it does not abolish, it only transforms, and it continues to transform itself, especially as we become more aware and become more conscious of the things that they're actually doing. And so in this climate, I'm two things. I'm somewhat optimistic, but then I'm also I'm fearful and curious as to what this new thing is going to look like after we've I guess come out of it, or when we've gotten to a place that we all feel as if everything has gotten back to normal. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just thinking about, you know, the nonprofit industrial complex and how, it really is not, there's nothing different about it, you know what I mean? And the way that maybe, the KKK functions, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it really is just a way of saying, oh, I'm not like them. You know what I mean? However, I'm still like them. It's like that being able to operate in secrecy while still maintaining that power and still like nothing has changed, And so I'm fearful because again, I know that, I don't think that we've seen enough. I don't think that we've done enough as a people in this particular within the last few months, I would say, right? That it's going to make the ruling class just say, oh, here you guys go, like everything you want, like here you go, like whatever you want, you know what I mean? And so again, I'm just very curious as to what this thing is going to look like. However, what makes me optimistic and what makes me hopeful is the fact that their desire doesn't change. You know what I mean? Their tactics might change, but the purpose and the reason for it is it never changes. So I mean, that's always going to be the way that they expose themselves. You know what I mean? And I really feel like in order for us to get anywhere, I really feel like Black and Brown people need to divest in a lot of these systems, in particular the nonprofit industrial complex. I mean, the fact that we're on the front lines. I mean, look at COVID-19, right? How so many of us had to continue to work in this environment while those who are the CEOs of a lot of these nonprofits are safe at home. They're in their vacation homes and in Maine. You know what I mean? They're not in their apartments in New York City. You know what I mean? But you're, going to work every day. You're putting your life on the line, and all you're getting is like from everyone at 7 o'clock. You know what I mean? I'm riding home on my bike because I don't want to take the train. You know what I mean? Because I had COVID, and I don't want to get that again, and I'm still having to show up at work. And I'm riding past on my bike through Park Slope, which is a very wealthy, neighborhood in Brooklyn. It's so wealthy that Black people get the cops calling them just for like, waiting for the bus at the bus stop, so, and riding by on my bike to get home while they're just cheering it was such a very disheartening and very just like, fuck you, you know what I mean? Like my grandmother died from this shit. Like my uncles just died from this shit, and I'm still having to come to work. I just got well. I was sick for a whole month, and so this is why I say we need, because at the end of the day, what happens is we feed this thing, we feed it with our blood, our sweat, and our proximity to the trauma, right? Our proximity to the impoverity, our proximity to the inequality, our proximity to the food desert, you know what I mean? All of those things that affect the people that we work for within these the nonprofit industrial complex. Like, we are those people, you know what I mean? So the same thing that affects them affects us. And what I realize is when something happens to you, it's such a revolving door that someone else pops up to take your place. And there's no mention of you ever, as if you were never there. You never existed. You know what I mean? And so this is how the system functions, where it doesn't need to advertise, it doesn't need to do anything but exist, because it has done such a good job of convincing people that criminalization and dog whistle politics and all these things benefit them, when in actuality it doesn't. It benefits the people who continue to reap the benefits from the blood that they shed, and so we need to start thinking of ways that we divest from that shit, because again, the world needs to see, and we need to be able to name the beast, right? We need to constantly be able to name the beast and divest from it, and somehow, and also I really, it's not just an American thing. This is a global, America is a global power. And so when we're talking about, like, systemic oppression. We're also talking about the ways in which America is a fucking imperialist fucking entity, right? And where America actually is. It's just not here, on indigenous land. It's everywhere where indigenous people live, where resources are, and so we need to also start to think about dismantling this type of system on a global scale as well, because we're not going to be able to by ourselves, abolish anything, you know what I mean, because of just how this system has been able to convince the world that Black and brown people are the enemy, and everything that you see us do to them, they deserve it, or they're doing something to merit this, and this is our way of keeping law and order and peace, you know what I mean? And it's bullshit, like we really need to, but then you have to tie into the fact that you live in a poverty-stricken environment. You don't have access to healthcare. We don't live in a society where we can actually do that in a way that our needs are still going to be met. And so you have all these things that keep us in this fucking cycle, you know what I mean, of oppression, and also empowering and feeding the same monster that's oppressing us.
Right.
Yeah.
Girl.
So,
Girl.
oh my God, like there's just so, I'm bursting here because there's so much of that. And just this thing about non-cooperation, like when we have got to talk about how to organize ourselves and our resources, which we do have, by the way, to stop cooperating and to make the system feel the cost of what it has done and keeps doing to us. Like, again, many people have noted this and folks don't like to hear it, but the reason why all of a sudden everybody's talking about defunding the police is because a bunch of people rioted and started burning shit.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like, this polite resistance thing where we're like, I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. Would you please notice my life? The reason we are even talking about the fact that Black Lives Matter is because people were like, I'm fed up, I'm done, I'm going to disrupt all this stuff. So I just want us to remind, and I want to even remind us, like, everybody likes to hold up MLK. There should be restrictions on who's allowed to talk about MLK. There should be a course that you have to go through before his name is allowed to come out of your mouth. But like, let's just all remember that his like nonviolent protest, people got hosed and they got dogs turned on them because that was still resistance, and the system still hated it. So all this idea that if you're just nice, we'll be nice to you, but
it's bullshit.
Stop that nonsense. But it's like, we have to recognize the power that we have if we organize ourselves. Like, this system depends on our cooperation. It depends on our labor. It depends on our bodies. Heck, it depends on our money. Like, yes, there are ways in which we are significantly disadvantaged financially. And I gotta tell you, McDonald's would not locate in our neighborhoods if we didn't have money. Right. They know we have money. There are all these businesses that locate in our neighborhoods to take our money.
Yes.
But we're still living in the narrative that says we don't have anything. And in the meantime, we're just giving away what we have to a bunch of people who are sucking it out of our communities. What would it look like? There are people who are trying to start movements around, and even in healthcare. This is not to say like that COVID just gets solved with like herbs, like I understand this. But like, what would it
solve
look
mine
like?
With herbs? No.
But like, what would it look like if instead of participating in a bunch of these systems, we gathered around the wisdom and knowledge that people have maintained or that people are reclaiming about food, about how we can live together, about what keeps us well, about educating our children, like, and ourselves, because we need a ton of re-education because we have learned so many ways. Like, there's so much anti-Blackness that lives within us. We then act out on ourselves and each other. So it's like, if we re-educated ourselves, and all of the great movements start with us actually getting getting re-educated in our frame. There's this amazing book by a Black scholar called Collective Courage. Her name is Jessica Gordon Nembhard. It talks about the role of African Americans in cooperatives in the United States, which nobody talks about. But we've been forming cooperatives and we've been organizing around our resources, and we can learn from those examples. We can learn what worked. We can learn where we got tripped up by existing narratives and structures, where we didn't practice self-defense. Ooh, we have to have a conversation about self-defense.
Okay.
But it's like, we have the ability to do this. We just have to decide that what we build is worth it. There's this amazing activist in Boston who I heard speak at an event many years ago. And he's like, one of our problems is that we think the white man's ice is colder than ours. We think that these white-led systems are somehow better than the things we build ourselves. We have so deeply internalized our inferiority that we don't realize and recognize our power. We have so much power and knowledge and wisdom, and we do have resources. We have got to decide that we want to put them toward what actually heals us and stop believing the lies, just the avalanche of lies that are poured on us about who we are, what we're capable of, why we have to rely on this system, otherwise we'll all die. We're all dying right now. So you know what? I'm gonna try something different.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's, and Brandy, when your internet was taking its time, Mish and I were talking about the concept of the welfare queen, which was a very, very wise tactic to play on the white image of us as these lazy bitches with our legs in the air, shooting babies out of our vaginas like an automatic tennis ball thing. And I don't know what that thing is called. And, and so I wanted to just bring that back, that is an example of just the blatant racist rhetoric that I remember I saw when I was growing up. I was part of the broken home generation where a lot, that's what they were calling it when you come from a single parent house, and what that does to your psyche when you think there's something broken about your house, and so what?
And not to recognize the history that they've been breaking up our homes. I'm sorry, you want to talk about
I'm about to throw this
respect the Black family. Why don't you understand respectable? Man, we've been having to reconfigure our families every other time because of every way that you start snatching our people. Ooh, I'm about to start saying some things.
It's fine. I say things all the time. But so while we're here in this spot, let's talk about white allies.
So they do exist.
Wow. Are these like M&Ms? They do exist.
And look, the reality is that all of us have to do our work divesting ourselves from the trappings of structural oppression. One of the biggest barriers for white allies is that they don't realize that they are traumatized and oppressed by structural oppression. They're busy thinking I've got it made as a white person, being set up in this position where I'm dehumanizingly expected to exploit other people and ignore their pain and bury all my feelings and lose my culture. And I'm not supposed to feel pain. I'm always supposed to be wealthy, whether or not I am actually wealthy, because only Black and brown people are poor. There's a whole lot of trauma in being white. And that's the number one thing. If white people don't deal with the trauma of being set up as an agent in structural oppression, then they're going to continue. Whenever we have unhealed traumas, we continue to act them out. They're continuing to act out their shame and their insecurity all over everything because they haven't dealt with the shit of being set up in a system that violates all their values and that violates their humanity. And part of the paternalism of white allies is when they think, well, I'm fine. I'm just here to help you. No, you need to get free. Get clear about the fact that you need to get free.
And also, and don't come to me talking about nothing. So real quick story time. She is story hour.
Story time.
So I went to a meeting. I joined this racial equity group. I'm not going to do too much because I'm not going to do too much, but you know, the meeting, the room, so that this kind of helps to set the tone. So it's a long table, and on one side is all the members of the foundation and my Black ass and like 2 other Black folks and a white man who was on the group but also a part of this organization too. So we were there to try to get some funding for a pilot program. So the white man turns it over to me and says, "Take it away." So I start to explain it. You know, I had just come from work, girl. I had my suit jacket on. I looked nice. And, you know, I'm just being my regular self, girl, just letting the girls have it. Like, here, girls, here's what we're doing. This is what we want. Anyway, so we're in there. And then they're just like, it was just mass chaos descended. And they are just, you know, asking all these questions. It's like rapid fire questions. And the 2 Black women just could not handle it. One of them shut completely off, like she just stopped talking. And the other one was just trying to, and it's almost like it made her feel, or it seemed to me that it made her feel like she was having to beg or trying to plead or show a sense of like, can you understand the humanity and the necessity in what I'm asking you? And by this point, I am sweating. So I've taken off my suit jacket because I am angry, because I did not expect to have to come into this meeting and basically like put my hand out for somebody to spit in it. So I'm tight because I didn't come here after work to deal with this. So I took off my suit jacket and I said, okay, so I think we need to do X, Y, and Z. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody in the room? And they're like, oh, yes. And I walked out. I was so angry. I like snatched my suit jacket and after the meeting was over with and walked out because I didn't come here for this. And what I told them when I talked to them later, because they asked me to join and be a member of the board. And I said, I'll be a member here, but because no other Black person that sets foot in this space with anybody needs to feel inequitable or not good enough. I was like, I'm with the shit. I love to fight. Not everybody likes to fight. And nobody should feel like because they don't like to fight that they don't have a seat at the table. Period. Motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But that's my example. Like, and that, like, just seeing that woman sit there and just be like, just kind of like Homer going back into the bushes, like, cause she just couldn't take, because they made her feel like one of them said afterwards, I felt like I had to beg, like I was begging. I was like, I'm not begging for $20,000. I was like, shit. I might,
you know, and like, this is the thing, like, folks are like, well, but why? And it's like, because I'm tired of having to beg for my money, my job, my house, for you to not shoot me doing any random particular thing. Exactly. Like, I'm sorry, which is, yeah. The number of things where we have to be like, please don't shoot our kids on the playground. Please don't shoot us while we're jogging. Please don't shoot me while I'm sleeping. Please don't shoot me while I'm driving. I'm tired of begging for my life and everything else within it.
Yeah.
Please hire me. I promise. I'm not stupid and I know how to talk and I know how to do things. Like, enough.
That voice.
Sorry, my sarcasm level is all the way up. And you know, like, one of the other things I was thinking about as you're saying this is like, in terms of white allies, this is the big one. So after folks do their work to recognize that they've got trauma, then they got to do an even bigger work, which is get ready to follow people of color, and particularly women and femmes and trans and non-binary folks of color.
Yes.
Because when white allies have to not only like show up, but then actually follow the leadership of folks and organize actually behind people of color and women being in charge, or behind being the minority in a space that is dominated by people of color and women and femmes and trans and non-binary folk, I'm sorry, some people freak the fuck out.
They do.
And they they lose their damn minds.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't understand how to be in that situation. And at the core, it challenges everything that they were taught about who they are supposed to be in the world. And they don't know how to handle it. And they don't know how to recognize that that's the reaction they're having.
Right.
So it's those two things, like understand the trauma of what the role that you have been assigned, and then understand all the ways that actually makes it hard for you to change power dynamics, because you have been taught that your very identity and personhood and sense of worth is tied to you maintaining the privileged position that whiteness has given you.
Mm-hmm.
And you are terrified of what will happen
Mm-hmm.
when you give that up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just that is the work around white allyship. And yet, yes, Black folks, we got to do our own healing work, because there's some stuff we do to each other. There's some stuff we do out in the world is not
It's
okay.
trash.
There's
It's trash.
Real trash. There's some like class and colorism stuff that we do with
colorism,
super trash.
sexism,
Yeah,
transphobia.
all the trash. Yes.
Yeah.
So much trash. And while we're doing our white, like, don't come to me with like, you know, black on black healing until you have dealt with your white on white healing.
Yeah. So we're in the crossroads. I mean, we're actually we're already in here. We're already here. But I wanted to ask. So I in the research too. Some of the solutions that came out were that, especially from Insight, was that nonprofits should be accountable to the movement. That they should be, that the movement itself is the power and the muscle, and the nonprofits should just be the sentinels that execute, as opposed to the other way around, where the nonprofits are running the space, they're running everything and doing it as in all the awful shit ass ways that we have outlined. So I want to ask you guys, one, what are some other solutions that you all think that there could be to dismantling the NPIC? The NPIC, I was thinking, you know what I was thinking about. And also if you can name any organizations that you think, you know, are doing the work, like we can call them out so that we can have some positive examples of folks who are actually accountable and doing the right thing.
Yeah, so I think you said it. Like, I think that, you know, we need to start to recognize what the function of the nonprofit industrial complex is. You know what I mean? And we need to start, you know, disrupting that. You know what I mean? We need to start calling it out, disrupting it, and calling it out for what it really is. You know, and I think then. Again, I'm not really for reform, you know what I mean? But we definitely need to, you know, like Brandy said, like we need to really divest also from it and kind of create our own, you know what I mean? Our own structures that support true liberation of Black and Brown people. I mean, honestly, that's really, for me, that's the only solution, you know. Do I feel as if there are organizations who are doing that? Yes, I do. But I think that they're more grassroots organizations. They're more organizations that have maybe a more militant stance, a more abolitionist stance on liberation and equality. And I think those folks who align themselves with abolition work, I think those are the people who are actually we should align ourselves with, or at least I also have I don't know, I think I have my own personal feelings about aligning with one particular organization, right? Because again, as a person with many different intersectionalities, I found that a lot of these organizations, as much as they are anti all these other things, you know what I mean? They're also anti-trans, you know, they're also anti-woman. They don't really necessarily believe in women in leadership. We don't want to call out we don't want to hold space with ourselves to start talking about those issues that affect our community and kind of are counter productive to the movement, you know what I mean, in very real ways. And so while they're out doing good work, there's also this I call it the ways in which we apologize to whiteness for being, and that's not my own. I've heard that somewhere else, where we apologize for calling out whiteness. We apologize for doing the work. We apologize for not wanting to tolerate oppression. You know what I mean? And so we on one hand, we say some very powerful things, and we're able to radicalize our people and mobilize our people to do the work. But then on the other hand, we say some other anti-fuck black shit that's just so like, what the fuck did you just say? You know what I mean? Like how in the world is that even possible? And you know who comes to mind? And y'all gonna disagree with me when I say this, but Kanye West. You know, like I feel like listen, like I was a Kanye stan at one point. No, hear me out. You know, I was a stan because I feel like there's so much brilliance in Kanye, but then there's also so much anti-blackness and also some other shit. You know what I mean? Let's talk about the mental health aspect. I'm not going to diagnose Kanye, and I'm not going to pathologize Kanye, because the DSM was created to again diagnose fucking radicalism and not wanting to tolerate fucking white supremacists as fucking schizophrenia. So later for that. But there's there's some clear trauma and PTSD and some other unresolved issues and hurt and whatever that he's dealing with, aside from his anti-blackness, aside from his brilliance, aside from his musical genius. I don't know if I want to throw Kanye away yet. I mean, as I do it. So, I mean, I didn't throw away Herman Cain. Now, Herman Cain, I didn't throw away. I don't know, but again, I say that to say, that, again, I think how we move forward is that we need to start thinking more abolitionist, from an abolitionist perspective, rather than trying to assimilate. And because assimilation, after a while, like infiltration always leads to, most times, assimilation. And so for me, I don't want to seat at your table. I really don't. I don't want to have conversations with you about healing and equity and change and all these things. I do them and I engage in them because I understand that there are people within a certain structure that I have to, that don't feel empowered to do that for themselves because they want to stay, right? And so before I leave, I'm going to disrupt some shit. So at least something, they get to benefit from something in maybe a small way until they start to, until they get to a point where they say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm now at a place where I want to say, fuck this shit. So then you create, breadcrumbs. You leave breadcrumbs for the next person who comes along. You know what I mean? And so I look at it in that way. But to be honest with you, I'm at a place where I'm like, I don't want to sit at your table. I want to really start. I want to look you in your face and I want to call you the fucking dirty, stinking dog that you are, because you know that you are. And then I want to be able to then defeat you. And I can't do that on my own. I need my people to do that. And so the more of my people that we can like pull out of that structure to then create the army that we're going to need, you know what I mean? Then that's what I want to do. And I feel like if we're really serious about liberating ourselves, then I feel like that's the mindset we need to have. We need to stop trying to appeal to people. We need to stop accepting their fucking Black Lives Matter fucking spray painted on the motherfucking walls and on the streets. We need to stop accepting their fucking shows. We need to stop accepting their fucking music videos. We need to stop accepting them accepting us on their platform or giving us a voice on their platform. Like we need to be done with that shit. Like we need to stop asking for shit. Like enough. Because regardless of whatever, they're not going to give it to you. I think about, I don't know how many of you guys know about Elijah McClain. So he was that boy that was murdered in Colorado,
Mhm.
and he like apologizing while they were murdering him.
Yeah.
You know, and that again, that it's not because, you know, it, like I think a lot of people were like, oh, like wow, like, but it's not wow. It's like it's the focus is all wrong. The focus should not be on him and what he's saying and what he's doing. And oh my God, what an inspiration. No, the focus is look at these fucking monsters
Right.
that even as this person is it, clearly you can tell that something is going on. This boy is from a particular lived experience, right? And no amount of politeness, no amount of respect, no amount of meekness, nothing is going to stop them from killing this person and laughing about it and joking about it. We need to stop. Like, we just need to, because again, that should be engraved in all of our minds, that there's no amount of love or forgiveness or peace that we can give them to merit or amount to any kind of real change towards our liberation. They're just not going to do it. Why? Because it's money, it's power. They're not giving that up easily. They're not going to do that. They're just not going to do that, you know?
You know, and I think I come from a little bit similar and a little bit different place where, you know, I do think there's an opportunity to extend love to folks who are dealing with the trauma of whiteness, but I don't think love looks like just being like, okay, whatever, you know, whatever you want to do, whoever you are, however you want to show up, that's great. I still love you. Sorry, yeah, this is my super sarcasm voice. But
I love it.
I mean, I'm sorry. People I love, if they're acting crazy, if they're acting fools, we're gonna have a conversation because I love them enough. You know, I love them enough to not let them stay acting all crazy with their ass hanging out.
Oh.
You know, like so this is the thing, is like, you know, it is not this like supplicant relationship. It has to be a real relationship. It has to be a real relationship where you can speak truth to each other. Yeah. And if people again could connect enough with how they've been harmed by this system, and folks again recognize they're trained to suppress it a lot. We're trained to suppress it a lot too. But like ours is more out on display. They're trained to suppress it in different ways and to have it hidden. But if they can connect with that and then decide to enter into a relationship where they are like real about trying to get free and get healed, then there is work that can truly be done. And you know, so I want to lift that up, and you know, in part because I think about, you know, you bring it up Kanye, and you know, yes, there's a part of me. You know, you're like, I'm not done. But like, look, if there's a conversation that could potentially be had with Kanye, not by me because I don't know him, but like around like what has gone on for, like, what is the root of this for you? Because as you said, there is some deeply unhealed pain and trauma there. And if there were folks in his life that could really speak to that, then you could begin the process of healing and helping him to come out of where he is, so that all of his brilliance and genius can actually be used toward his liberation and the liberation of his people. So that potential is there, but it really requires us to shift relationships. And that's a lot of work. So each of us got to choose how deep we're doing that work with other people, because I can't hold like everybody, but there are folks where I can say, all right, I'm going to invest in going deep with you because I believe that you're the place where we can meet each other and have this conversation. And I do seek out those folks, those other Black folks, white folks, you know, folks from all different racial and ethnic backgrounds, because I believe that we have to heal together. I actually do really believe that. And I also, like, I don't take people just randomly abusing me and acting crazy because they feel like it, because I've got limits and I'm only a human person.
Right. And like the Kanye West, it's like the thing is, like it's a trigger point, Mish. So if you had shown up in 2004 and said, girl, in about 16 years, you are going to meet someone else, I'd be like, no, what are you talking about? Do you hear all the great things he says? He's so black. It's so great. Yeah. And the thing is, I try to keep my mouth shut about most stuff on this here program. Like I did read Terry Crews just a little bit. He deserved it. I said he needs to go have a Sankofa moment. I hope people go look that movie up because that's what he needs to do. But Kanye, it's just like, it to me, Kanye underpins obviously what happens when you have mental illness and the struggles and the challenges of it. It also underpins to me what happens for Black folks when it comes to that class, when it comes to that money. Because Misha and I have talked, actually all three of us have talked about this separately, and Misha and I talked about academia, and there's actually an academic industrial complex, and I don't even really have my dip foot. I don't even have my whole Vogue dip foot in academia quite yet, but I can kind of understand where that's coming from. But it's just like there's something about Black folks when it comes to that money. And that being able to just not be at that point anymore, that really makes some people, it makes them forget what it's like. And I think it's a struggle. I know, in my experience, especially within the nonprofit space, like I never wanted to work for a nonprofit because I like money a lot and I like to make it, and I will make little sacrifices so I can make more. I'm not talking about stripping. I'm just saying, but I'll make the sacrifices so I can have me some money. I love it. I love money. So the nonprofit was just not for me. But what I remember in my experiences, I've obviously you both, but also other friends too who work in the nonprofit space, and it's just little young white women, and they can take these circus peanuts and pay because they have a partner, a boyfriend or a husband. They live at home with their parents. They have some kind of hookup or supply. So for me, it was never a thing, but I never wanted to get too far away, no matter how much money I made. I never wanted to get too far away because I always wanted to be able to be that person that could stay grounded. And I think that's the problem with the higher you go, it is harder to stay grounded. And that's all I'm gonna give Kanye. And I gave a little to Herman Cain too, but he did. And he's my Morehouse brother, and I'm trying to keep it cute.
So, and I mean, I do want to say, I just want to name that, like, nonprofits and for-profits are basically the same corporate complex.
They really are.
They just use different strategies to extract your energy. Ugh. So like one of them uses like mission and all this. The other one uses like, we'll give you all the corporate treats. Anyway, like either way, like doesn't matter which side you're on, they're still trying to take you.
I know.
And and Rashida, I mean, you know,
girl,
that like corporate America is not getting it done.
It's sucking the life out of my forehead.
Exactly. And I want to say something about like this desire we have, because you mentioned this, Misha, and I loved it, and I've forgotten about like this idea of infiltration being assimilation. It's because we don't take infiltration seriously. Like infiltration is specifically like a technical guerrilla military tactic to take down a structure from the inside. And you don't send random unprepared newbie off the street to go infiltrate a system. You prepare your people. One of my favorite shows in the world is The Americans. This is a show that used to be on FX, and it's about these Russian spies that were embedded in the United States in the 80s during Cold War to like live here and carry out assassinations while looking like a regular American family. Ooh. So yeah, it's like, but the thing I love about this show is that it makes it super clear what it takes to be an infiltrator. It is some hard ass stuff. So all of us who are like, oh, I'm gonna go change this system from the inside, you need to show how you have prepared yourself for what that'll be like. And they always have lines of communication, lines of accountability, support structures, because you don't send anybody into the system without preparing them, because that system is just going to try and take them and turn them, and that, so you don't just like randomly walk in and say, somehow my mere presence, like, look, I'm a Leo. I believe that
Okay.
I believe that I am the most fabulous. I got that.
Y'all
And I
so
still
loud.
know.
God damn.
I still know that I cannot go into that system without proper accountability and support.
Right. Right.
Also, Leo's rule.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Also, like,
It's a
what?
Gemini
I just
program.
found out Brandy's a Leo.
Yes.
Dang, dang,
Oh
dang.
my God.
Misha and I are like, woo!
Okay. This is a Gemini program. Okay. Gemini program. I mean, I have Leo is in my moon, so I get it. I'm sure both of you know when I call you, like, hello, I've
Yes.
called.
Leos have infiltrated this podcast.
You know what's funny? The crazy shit is that Seema's a Leo too. Her birthday was on the 4th, and she's my guest in residence too, and she's a Leo.
See, you want us all to be with you. You love us so much.
Oh my God.
You're fake.
What have I done?
Happening.
Oh my God. Okay. Everybody, I really appreciate the both of you taking the time to come on this Zoom with me, knowing I didn't know what I was doing with my blue glasses and the whole 9 yards. I really, I just really appreciate it. It was so much information and knowledge that was shared. And I appreciate you all taking the time. So before we close, are there any projects that you guys are working on that you want to shout out, and your social media, if you want to, hit it.
Yeah. So first off, Rashida, I want to thank you for continually creating this space to uplift Black knowledge, to uplift the work that we are doing, our voices, our perspectives. So that's no short thing. Blue glasses or no, you were doing the work and you were getting it done, and you were preparing to create that space in a whole bunch of ways. So first off, I want to give props to you, and I want to give props to the Crossroads podcast, because I think it's amazing. I really want to encourage everybody, if you are looking for a place to invest in transforming leadership and shifting things and supporting people who are building their own stuff, the organization that I run, Political Healers, you can find us on Facebook /Political Healer. You can find us on Twitter, Political Healer. And you can find us on our website, which is politicalhealers.org. And this is just a great organization that, again, is really centering the leadership of women and femmes and trans and non-binary folks of color, and the work that we have been doing to sustain our organizations, to sustain our communities, to sustain our movement, that is consistently getting unrecognized. I want to note that if you go to politicalhealers.org /events, we have a training coming up on Wednesday, August 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern that I will be co-leading, called the Foundation of Feminine Leadership. Come and help us learn. It's your opportunity to come and learn about how we are all actually trapped by the gender binary and kept from really expressing the fullness of our leadership energies, and how we can start to break out of that. We've got another training on trauma-informed practice at the end of the month, August 26th, also 7 p.m. Eastern. Feeling safe, seen, and heard, a really great session that I encourage you. That's going to be led by my co-director, Michaela Lovegood. And then finally, we've got our Digital Issues Summit that is going to be happening on August 29th and 30th. It's going to be a great opportunity to really delve in on how we develop these agendas and lead from our full range of gender energies around things like housing, healthcare, reproductive justice. So again, if you go to politicalhealers.org /events, you will find registration for all of those things, and I would really love to see you all come out. Also donate, because we're in the middle of a fundraising campaign, and we want to be building this up and really building community strength and stuff as we head into general election season.
So if you want to, Misha Forbes at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I will say, don't follow me if you
You're faint of
if you
heart.
don't want to hear certain things.
Don't follow her.
Certain things.
Don't do it.
So I'll just put that out there.
It ain't bold.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that shit.
Yeah, I don't.
If you want
I'll
Vogue, you should
say,
come to me, not her.
I'll say, I'm not currently working on anything publicly. As you know, Rashida, I'm doing some very personal things that's gonna pretty much take up the majority of the rest of this year. So I'll be doing that, and then doing some other things later on. But for the most part, I'll say that if there is a trans or non-binary Black person or femme person that or any folks who are out there, or any GoFundMe's, please donate to those people. Support Black and brown, trans, non-binary, and femme people. Um, Listen to us, hear us, love on us. And I'm speaking to the people that look like us. Again, I don't appeal to anyone that don't look like me. And so I speak to everyone that looks like me in love, and to say, please stop killing trans people, support trans people, believe trans people.
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you, Mish. Couple groups that I think are really amazing and excellent. One is Life After Release. They're based in PG County. It's run by Kiana Johnson, obviously Black woman led. Also LA Moss, it's based in Los Angeles. I have a couple friends that work there. And last but not least, People for Mobility Justice, which is really an excellent program, also based in LA, focusing on issues of mobility. And it's a flat structure. It's all LGBTQ and Black and Indigenous people of color. So it's an excellent organization. Also, if the folks have been listening, Urban Habitat is another excellent organization, also begun by a Black man, doing the work of housing justice, but also environmental justice as well. So, and with that being said, actually, one quick thing. This is for Mish. So because when she says so let me just say this to you girls. So when I talk about Vogue, right? Because I love Vogue, I love it down. Like, it's my life. It's like one of my lives. But when we say love on trans people, not just one or the other, but all people, we're not just talking about love what they do. We're not talking about learn how to, give hands and give face and all that. We're actually talking about real love. Like when you see a trans person, just leaving them the fuck alone if you don't know them, not staring at them, not making any abnormal eye contact, none of it. Leave them alone. If you see someone that is maybe being accosted, and you feel empowered, or you have a knife or a rock, tell whomever to back off. Make sure you walk that person home or to wherever their destination is so they can get there safely. That's allyship. Don't come on talking about how much you love RuPaul's Drag Race and how you love the show Legendary, but when we ask you what you're really doing to protect trans people, you're not doing it. Right. Protecting trans people or loving trans people isn't loving what they provide for you. It's not loving them when they're doing your hair and teaching you how to walk and sashay. It's actually loving them from a place of real love and real solidarity and trust. And if you can't do that, then you need to go log off. So the beauty, and I will say one more thing, the great thing that I was able to learn, through my experience of ballroom was not just the people and what they gave me, how they performed. It was the story that they told me. It's the story they told me about where they came from, how they were not accepted and how they weren't loved, and that they went to this place and they found love and acceptance. And that's the piece that bound me. That not looking soft and cunt. It was about who the person it's about who the person is inside. And that's what bound me. So that's what my show is. My show is sex positive, and it is for everybody. It's for every Black person, no matter what your intersection is. And that's the kind of space that I'm trying to create with this show. And the next time I do this Zoom, I'm not gonna wear my spectacles.